This episode of the Great Girlfriends podcast is being brought to you by Healthy Women and Biohaven Pharmaceutical. For more information, visit healthywomen.org. Welcome to the Great Girlfriends podcast, where we discuss life, love, laughter, and everything in between. I'm your host, Sibla Muti. Hello, Great Girlfriends. Happy Wednesday, I would say, because you're probably listening to this as a fresh drop into our podcast episodes. I am so excited because I have partnered with Healthy Women to bring really informative guests in the healthcare and patient care industry forward. And I'm so excited today because I have one of those guests with me today. I want to introduce you to a woman who has gone on a journey with migraines. And if you've ever experienced a migraine, you know that they can sometimes be debilitating. And if you have them, if you have recurring migraines, you know, that excessive and repetitive pain, it can just really handicap lots of areas of your life. And so for that reason, and with so many of our community really going through migraines or experiencing them this year specifically, I thought it'd be very special to bring on someone who is on the patient side of things and kind of understands that journey and has learned how to navigate through these migraines and find some solutions. So I want to introduce you today to a woman, Shoshana Lipson, who's a patient advocate, speaker, and writer. She's the president of Hope and Pain, Inc., as well as the founder of the Hope for Migraine Community and Migraine Meanderings. Through these organizations, she seeks to educate, support, and inspire people with migraines to find purpose and value in the midst of chronic illness and not give up hope, because we do know that sometimes you want to give up hope. She has been living with migraine disease for most of her life. After having to stop full-time work in 2014, Shoshana started exploring how to use her background in nonprofit management, social media, and public speaking to help with migraine advocacy. Shoshana has a passion to touch people who are struggling with the physical and emotional effects of migraines and other headache disorders through authentic and real-life sharing. Over the past 2 years, she has built a community of over 10,000 active members on social media. Shoshana collaborates with CHAMP, the Coalition for Headache and Migraine Patients, as well as other organizations and leaders. I would say Shoshana is a healthcare great girlfriend, and I want to welcome you, Shoshana Lipson, to the Great Girlfriend Show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on here today.
Your bio gives us a really strong glimpse into how you took a pain point and turned it into a solution, not just for yourself, but for thousands upon thousands of women and people out there who are also encountering that same scenario with what it's called headache disorders. That's a new word for me, but headache disorders.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I love the fact that, not only did you not sit in the pain or stay there, you decided to advocate, get up and use that story to kind of help create some deliverance for other women.
Yeah, definitely. It's been quite a journey. And my overall theme is always not letting the pain go to waste. But it's hard to not let the pain go to waste. It's easy to get distracted by it. And it's definitely been a journey for me getting to the point where I am right now.
I can only imagine. And that journey started with pain. So I want to get into your migraine story. When did they first start for you, and what was that like?
Sure. So my earliest childhood memories are of having migraine attacks, really acute, agonizing pain that started on one side of my head, nausea, vomiting sometimes. And literally, we're talking about earliest memories. So definitely by the age of 7 or 8, I have very clear images in my mind of having a migraine attack. And my guess is that it likely went back before that as well. But it's been interesting to see how things have developed over the past few decades, because back then there were no treatment options for migraine and very little understanding. And so when I was a child having these migraine attacks, my parents were fabulous. They did everything they could. But at that time, because we didn't have any medications and such a little understanding about this disease, there was very little that they could do. So it was basically using old wives' tales and pain medication and going to a room and lying down in the dark and quiet. And there were no other options, no other ways to manage what was going on at that time which made it really difficult. There was the lack of understanding, I think, was amplified once I started going to school, and the school nurse, for example, my teachers didn't understand, and a lot of people had this impression that I could just push through, or I was pretending. I was using it as an excuse because it was just a little headache, nothing major. Mm-hmm. And so that was the kind of responses that I would get from people when I was a child. And that was really hard to manage and to deal with.
I can only imagine as a child, because you're trying to articulate this pain that you've not experienced before. And it's almost, taking so much energy and even kind of really disorienting you a bit, but also I'm sure that made a lot of things difficult for you as a child. What kind of things were you, what were harder than others for, that you experienced as a child?
Sure, absolutely. I would say that I'm a very visual person, so I like to kind of paint pictures in people's minds. And for me, it's kind of like, picture, if you would, like a child who has some kind of contagious disease or illness, and they're inside and they got like their hand on a window pane, kind of watching the world go by, and they can't go out and they can't participate in it, and they're thoroughly miserable. And that is basically what my childhood life was like with migraine, because you feel like that. You're like on the inside watching the world go on as though everything is totally normal, but things are not normal for you. And so I tend to use this phrase, the normals, which I know is kind of a weird phrase, but to me, someone who has a normal life can make plans and know that they're going to follow through with them, can expect that they're not going to have pain, can hang out with their friends, doesn't have to worry about going to a movie theater or a restaurant, or being exposed to triggers such as scents and lights and things like that. So all the things that people take for granted, I was not able to take for granted. And so there were always caveats for everything that I did. And I felt, to be honest, I felt defective and different from people. And that is very isolating. It's a very, very lonely place to be. And I have very clear memories of feeling that isolated and different and lonely and not sure how to explain to people and misunderstood. And that added to the challenge of dealing with the pain and the other symptoms of the migraine attacks.
And you know what's so interesting, Shoshana? You're actually probably helping a mother out because children do their best to articulate pain, but it's our jobs as parents to really dive deeper into their communications, right? Because children don't know the words, but they do know what they're feeling. And it's up to us to pay attention. And what I'm hearing you say is the consequences of that, of headache disorder, of migraine, isolated you in a way that, really kind of affected your ability to socialize and to connect and to orient as other children would. So for any mom who's listening, and, maybe symptomatically you've seen or experienced some things out of your child, or, a communication that your child is trying to lean into, I'm taking notes personally from what you've just spoken. And I'm also going to, do my own investigative analysis to kind of see, what we should do better as parents to kind of learn how to listen. I also want to know from you, during that time frame, what were some of the triggers? Like, what were some of the things that really, really tipped you over as far as your migraines?
Sure. So when I was a child, I had very little understanding about triggers and what could make them worse, what could actually cause them to happen. It's been a much more recent thing for me. But looking back now, I know that obviously barometric pressure changes. I knew that wind would do it. So I grew up in England where it's wet and windy a lot of the time. We don't see a lot of the sun. And for me, that just kind of helps create the perfect storm. So wind blowing on my face when it gets damp and humid, whether it's hot or whether it's cold. So I'm thinking about when I was at school and I was having to do cross-country running as part of gym. All those things were like major migraine triggers for me. My number one trigger is actually scent. And I knew that even as a child, especially as I went into adolescence. Some of my friends were experimenting with perfume. And the only thing that I could use was natural lemon scented fragrances. Everything else was completely off the books. So those are like some of my biggest things. But I have a lot of triggers. So flashing lights, bright lights. Every time I got a sinus infection, if I wasn't sleeping well, if the sun was too bright, exercise itself could trigger migraine. Traveling always triggered migraine. And then, of course, neck pain. So I have this huge litany of triggers. And I'm lucky in one sense because I've never been able to find any food triggers.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, so it's always good to look at the positive, right?
Yes.
Or even if it's just like a small little thing. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think that, jumping forward like a few decades, I was really, really excited to discover that chocolate was not a trigger for me. I'm a chocoholic. I know that it can be for some people, but for me, it was like, one thing that is normal. Yeah. I eat chocolate. So kind of celebrating the small wins was a huge thing. But yes, I have a lot of triggers and I increasingly became aware of them as I got older as well.
That's amazing. And, I think about that when I read in your bio that you said you stopped your full-time work in 2014. Was that relative to your migraine journey and some of the
yes,
effects? Okay.
Definitely.
Can you share a little bit
Of course. So migraine is generally kind of divided up into two classes. There's episodic migraine and chronic migraine. So episodic migraine is when you have a migraine or headache day up to 14 days a month. And then chronic is 15 plus days per month. It's kind of an arbitrary division. Of course, you could have 10 really, really severe migraine attacks that are completely debilitating. They could put you in the emergency room, or you can have a migraine every single day, but very low grade migraine, so you can still function. So it is definitely kind of an arbitrary division, but I went from very high frequency episodic to chronic. And I'd kind of been in and out of that for many years. But by the time I got to 2014, I was well and truly chronic. I was having migraine attacks almost every single day. And some of them were just an attack that I couldn't stop. So I could have a migraine that lasted a week or even longer sometimes. And then on top of that, I also had comorbid conditions, because the thing about migraine disease is that there are so many comorbid conditions that go along with that. So I was having GI pain. I was having very severe neck pain and just a lot of joint disorders in general. And so combining all those things together just literally made it impossible for me to have a regular job where you're expected to show up, no surprise, where you're expected to do the work that you're being paid to do. And your employer doesn't have to worry about whether you're going to be there or whether you're actually going to be present when you are there. And it got to the point I just was no longer able to guarantee being able to act as a regular employee, even with medication. And so I think the erratic nature of migraine made it just help make that final decision, because I never knew when I was going to get a migraine attack. And so it was just impossible for me to continue working. And that was a real brain trip. I think there's no other way to put it than that, discovering at my age that I was no longer able to work, no longer able to function in the world like everybody else could, made me feel useless, even more defensive. I'd kind of lost my identity. I was a single mother at the time, and so still had to support my children. And it was two of whom also had migraine as well. So it was a very difficult time. And you talk about what it's like being a mother of someone with migraine. And, my heart often goes out to my mom for what she saw me go through. But definitely going through pain yourself is terrible enough. When you watch your children go through the same pain and symptoms and you know what they're experiencing, it's really devastating, for sure.
Wow. So with your children, or with one of your children also experiencing migraine disease, is there any genetic association to it, or is it,
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So there definitely is a genetic association to it. There's a lot of studies going on right now in terms of genetics, trying to figure out all the different links. And also, ideally, what we really want to know is not only the hereditary link, but also the perfect place would be where we get to saying, okay, person X has these genes, and therefore they're going to respond to medication ABC but they respond to XYZ, so that we can do targeted therapy, as it were. But there's definitely that genetic link. They say that if you have one parent who has migraine, then there's a 50% chance that any child will have migraine. If you have two parents, then that percentage goes up to 75% chance.
Wow.
And that is a really huge link. A lot of people with migraine now sadly decide not to have children because of that. And that is really heartbreaking to make a decision like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I have a ton of questions, because now I'm wondering, okay, so at what point do you know that it's time to go to the doctor and get this diagnosis? And, you know, because a lot of people will just, you know, assume it's just a headache. And if you know, don't know much medically, you won't understand that it's at a recurring pace. But how do you know when it's time to go to the doctor and have that conversation?
Absolutely. That's a really great question. And actually, that's part of one of the things I'm really passionate about, because there is a tendency for people who have migraine disease to minimize it. And it is an invisible disability. And so because people don't see it, because we don't have a cast on our arm or our leg or anything obvious that's wrong with us, and because people don't understand, we tend to hide it. We tend to over-medicate in terms of taking over-the-counter medications and keep pushing through. We're really minimizing a disease that is devastating and often completely debilitating, and that's really sad. And part of the problem with this disease is that it often chronifies, which means that it progresses. And one of the risk factors for it progressing is if it is not effectively and adequately managed at the early stages. So obviously for myself, there was no option for that because there were no treatments around. But for example, I'll tell my children all the time, you need to be aggressive about this. You need to see a doctor. You need to take preventive medication, because otherwise there's a good chance this disease will chronify and will get worse as you get older. So I would say to anyone out there, if you think you may have migraine, or if you know that you have migraine and you're getting more than 2 or 3 days a month, definitely more than 2 or 3 days a month, maybe even less than that, go to see a doctor, make sure you have a diagnosis, and talk to them about preventive medication and about effective abortive medication. It's really important to have medical care. And that opens up a whole other kettle of worms, because there are not enough certified headache specialists available. But that's a whole nother topic for another conversation. But definitely it should be taken seriously.
And that was going to be my next question. What doctor are you going to?
Right. Well, I see a certified headache specialist. It's a great, it's just such a huge issue.
Yeah. Like, where do you go? I mean, you know.
Right. It's hard. Honestly, there are 40 million people in the United States alone, 1 billion globally, who have migraine disease. But in the United States, we have less than 600 certified headache specialists.
What?
And that's a problem. And then on top of that, there is no mandated education in medical school for doctors to study and to learn about any kind of headache disorder. So not have people who are certified to treat it, not enough people, but we also have all these doctors who only know about migraine what they're able to read in the physician's desk reference, or what they're able to look up themselves, the same as us, which is a whole problem. So if you are just beginning on your migraine journey, then of course, go to your primary care doctor, talk to them. If you're not happy with what you hear, go see another doctor. And I tell that to everyone, you have a right to change doctors. If you have complex migraine, or migraine that is not responding to medication, or it's really affecting your life, then you probably need to see a certified headache specialist. And that's not the same as a neurologist. So there's like a whole lot of steps you can go through. And it definitely can be a frustrating journey, because there aren't enough headache specialists out there. And even the ones that are out there often are not covered by our insurance. So there's a lot of access barriers to actually helping people manage this disease effectively, which is sad.
Who knew? I would never have imagined. You said 600? That is like,
yes.
That's impossible for people to really have access to quality care unless are they in specific markets, or, are they typically driven to a certain coast, or is it just throughout the
Sure.
US?
So I actually have a database that has every single certified headache specialist in America on it. And then we actually added patient recommended doctors. We don't allow doctors to recommend themselves, or either we want patients to recommend them. And we added the patient recommended doctors because there just simply aren't enough certified headache specialists. But there are some states where there are none, literally none, which creates a whole other issue, because some of the new migraine medications that were recently FDA approved, you need to actually have a headache specialist prescribe them, according to some insurance companies. And if there is no headache specialist in your state, then that creates a problem. So they are kind of spread out around the country. They're definitely concentrated in certain areas. But again, the fact that some states have none, and even like California has a fair number, but my insurance does not cover any headache specialist. It's not even just as simple as, is there one near you? But your insurance may not cover it, or you may have a 6 to 12 month wait to get into one. And so it's definitely challenging. And it creates challenges that most people are completely unaware of. They don't realize that this issue exists.
Yeah. And it sounds like something that you learn when you're looking out, when you're when you're a patient and you're trying to look for resources to help support your journey, that's when you really learn the disadvantages, that patients really go through. That is really, really powerful information. I also wonder, when you talk about the stages of migraine disease, what is what is like the final stage of migraine disease? What does that look like for people?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that I would say the final stage.
Okay.
Generally, migraine has not got a lot of attention because it's not linked to mortality rates. See this as a disease that actually causes someone to die. But there's not an end stage like that. The sad thing is that because of all the medications you take and the comorbid conditions, that it does actually have that consequence in some people. And there's a very high suicide rate as well, which is heartbreaking because people can't manage the pain. So I would say by the time you either have high frequency episodic migraine that are severe, or you have chronic migraine, you're not in an end stage, but you're in a stage where it really needs to be taken very seriously. You need to be proactive and stop this. There's this concept of just pushing through. We need to push through. But by pushing through, we're actually often making ourselves worse. We're adding conditions, we're adding complications. And then ultimately that makes it hard to manage. And I'm a prime example of that. I pushed through for decades, took way too much medication, caused a lot of other conditions and side effects. And so this idea of needing to push through in order to prove that we have worth and value really backfires on a lot of us. So for anyone who's feeling like they need to do that, I would say you really do not need to do that. There are options, and there's an amazing migraine community available now where we're online, we're everywhere. People are willing to offer advice and support. And I think most of all, just to tell people you're not alone in this. You're not defective, you're not alone, and your life still has value and purpose. We just need to have a change of perspective in how we approach life with migraine. Hopefully that makes sense.
That's so good. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's the thing, the consequence of people feeling alone in their journey is that isolation. And like you said, the high suicide rate, these are things that I would never imagine, but I can also imagine without solutions where, people feel handicapped. And, the consequence of that is, whatever decisions they decide to make at that point. But not you. Because with your pain and with your lessons and with your experience, you decided to take the megaphone and become really loud about patient advocacy. I mean, seriously. And I have to say, I truly respect when people learn more and do more, not just for themselves, but for other people. That's effective citizenship. That's humanity. It's when you realize it's bigger than you. And so for you to realize and recognize at some point in your journey, and I'd like to know when, that it was bigger than you and that you needed to really rally around others who are dealing with migraine disease. What did that look like for you?
Sure. There was definitely like an aha moment and a turning point. Kind of ashamed to say it. It took me decades to get there. It was almost like I was so focused on just trying to survive physically that everything else was cut out. But say it was back in 2018. I'd already applied for disability. I was in the middle of a 3.5-year fight to get that, which was a whole other thing in itself. It's very hard to get approved for disability based on migraine. It's not listed as one of the conditions. And so compare the limitations to someone who has epilepsy. And so that's something that we're trying to get changed, definitely. But back in 2018, I had discovered the online migraine community, and I'd made a quick post or comment in a migraine group, and someone replied, "Gentle hugs." 2 little words. And I started crying. It's like something just broken me. And I realized how isolated and how alone I felt. And yet, seriously, how just 2 little words could make a huge difference. And then after that, we were getting ready for the new migraine medications that were about to be approved on the market. It was going through something called ICER, which gives recommendations to insurance companies about what should be covered and what shouldn't. And I saw another person who had migraine, who's now a great friend of mine. Her name is Katie. And she was speaking at an ICER meeting, and she was in the middle of a migraine attack. And she was losing her words. So she was stumbling over her words. She couldn't find her words. And I looked at her and thought, that is me. I'm like that. And yet here she is standing up and making a difference. And if she can do it, then I can do it too. And literally it was like a light bulb went off in my head, that this was something that I could do, that I had a passion about, I had the knowledge for. Shortly after that, I started my first Facebook group. It just exploded in size. And I made the decision that, a lot of people are very cautious about sharing what's going on in their life in terms of their health and how they feel. I just decided that if something helped me, it would probably help someone else. So I just became an open book. And I think I've become known for just sharing authentically and openly and just being really honest about what life with migraine is like. And I'm seeing that impact people and everything like giving up, which happens frequently. And I get messages from people that say, you're really making a difference and we appreciate you. And so I think it's that rediscovering a purpose, discovering that even in the midst of this pain, this debilitating disease, there are still things I can do. There's still value and purpose to my life, and that I can make a difference in someone else's life. That gives me the strength to face tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that is really the power of advocacy and speaking out.
I love that. I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it so much because we're meant to be bridges as humans. We're meant to connect one to another through whatever parts of our journey that another person will locate themselves in. But it's our responsibility to really open access, vulnerability.
Right.
That's the safe space where people can really grow and connect. Each one of us, people often feel like being vulnerable makes you weak, but being vulnerable is your absolute strength.
Yes.
And it is the biggest opportunity for you to really grow and overcome things when things have, when the journey is insurmountable. Right. And so I really, really support that. I love that. Few things that I still want to understand, because I'm so grateful to Healthy Women for being a vessel through which we're having this conversation, right? And, so many learnings that I'm taking away from the experiences that you all share with me on the show, each different guest. And I just want to know about your friendships. How have your friendships played a role in this? Because everyone in your life has to have understanding, right?
Right.
Yeah. So how have your friendships played a role in this?
That's Again, you're asking so many great questions. I feel like we could talk about this for hours.
Oh, thank you.
because you're touching on some really important points. One of the sad things about chronic illness versus acute illness is that people who don't have health challenges generally do not understand. There are some amazing people out there who really take the time and have the passion to understand, but most people do not. So when you are constantly canceling and when you're constantly getting sick, when people don't understand why you're getting sick so much, then one of the saddest things about this disease is that people tend to drop off and you lose your friendships. There's no big breakup. There's no explosion or angry words. It's just that they drift away and people get tired of inviting you to do things. And a lot of times they don't want to accommodate you. So like, again, my biggest trigger is scent. So I have to tell every person I get together with, please don't wear perfume. If you're a guy, don't wear cologne. You can't even wear highly scented deodorant or highly scented shampoo if you're going to be around me. Wow. And some people want to understand and will make that change. Other people really don't. And that's very sad because there's a lot of us out here with migraine, but there's other conditions as well. Asthma, for example, can be triggered by things like that. So I think friendships tend to drift away, and that's really heartbreaking. But the positive side is that I have to say, I have never met more amazing people than I have met in the migraine community. The first person I met physically in person who was as sick as me was actually one of my closest friends who lives on the East Coast. And she and her husband came out to California and we got together and it totally blew me away. She and I are very different. There's about 15, 20 years age difference. We have different backgrounds, everything about us is different. But we had this common bond in migraine disease. And it has connected us in a way that is incredible. She and there are some other amazing women who I know now who, if when I'm desperate, if I have a bad doctor's appointment, if I get a new diagnosis, anything that kind of pushes you over the edge, a migraine attack, I just can't stop. I can get on the phone with them. I can cry. I can talk things through. I can, and they will encourage me and just be there for me. And I would say that these friends within the migraine community, especially, they have literally become a lifeline for me. And I just treasure them beyond words. It doesn't make a lot to make a difference in someone's life. But these women who have lost so much, give so much to help other people. And it's really impacted me. And so I try to be that friend to other people as well, because I know what a key difference that makes and how important it is to take care of our mental well-being, not just our physical well-being.
Wow. I would have never imagined all of that. And so, great girlfriends, it's important for us to really, really carry empathy for our friends, for the people that we love, and learn how to support people in the best way we can. And I often think that it's a good thing that those who are not intended to be on our journey find an exit ramp.
Right.
Because it makes space for the people that are intended to be on the journey, right? So you've developed or you've acquired all of these great new friends that get you, that understand what you're experiencing and that want to support. Yes. So that's truly, truly powerful. So Shoshana, in those moments where, you are not feeling your best and, the migraines are at that debilitating point, what are some of the things that you tell yourself? What is that affirmation that you give yourself to get up and not necessarily press through, but to be patient and gracious?
Sure. It's really important, actually, what we tell ourselves, the thoughts that go through our head, the words that come out of our mouth really impact us. And I think it's important to know that with migraine disease, that it doesn't just affect your body physically. It also affects our mind. It can cause depression. It can cause anxiety. It can cause feelings of hopelessness. And so there are things that we cannot control. We cannot necessarily control all the triggers. We can't always control the pain. We can't control the consequences in our life, financially and relationship-wise and things like that. But what we can control are the words that come out of our mouth and the thoughts that we think. And there's a lot of people that really tout things like cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness and meditation. I'm a huge fan of these. And what I find myself doing and saying increasingly is every time there's a negative thought going through my head, this is going to be a migraine that never stops. I'm useless. My husband's going to leave me. My kids are going to hate me. I'm a burden to everyone. I'm defective. What is the point of going on in life? All these thoughts that go through your head when you live with chronic pain, I'm starting to speak back to them and say, I have value and I have purpose. It's important to be kind to myself. I'm a compassionate, kind person. It's okay to rest. This is going to pass. Now, that's not meant to be like a platitude, as in this is all going to be over, because I know it's going to come back again. But this particular attack will end. And I am going to get through it. I'm going to survive. So all these things, just kind of answering back the negative committee in my head with more kind of positive, affirming things is really, really important. I think also giving yourself the grace to not push through, to be kind to yourself. There are days that I just do Hallmark marathons. I hope it's okay to mention that channel, just because it's just easy watching movies. They're not loud. They generally aren't big flashing lights. Mm-hmm. You don't have to think too much. A lot of the time it's hard to think when you have a migraine. So I just stay in bed sometimes and I watch movie after movie after movie. I may play a game on my phone. Again, nothing that's like high action that's going to increase my pulse or flashing lights, but something that will distract me from the pain and give myself permission to do that when I get panicky about, I'm not ready for, ABC that is coming up, or I'm behind on my schedule, or things are not getting done. Mm-hmm. I can choose to either kind of lean into that anxiety and just kind of go down a rabbit hole, or I can choose to say, I'm just going to set that aside because there is nothing I can do about it right now. And when I feel better, I will get as much done as I can, and that is okay. So I think a lot of what I do is kind of positive affirmation, self-talk, taking the time to breathe, and just being gracious to myself. A lot of us are really not gracious to ourselves, and not only see expectations from other people, but we have unrealistic expectations on ourselves, and that does not help us at all.
Mm-hmm. At all. One of the things I've learned on my journey in my life is the grace I give myself is the patience that I'm looking for when those moments are hard and frustrating. It doesn't come from an outside source. It really is sitting on the inside, but it comes from a grace that we offer ourselves. Shoshana, I just want to thank you. I want to thank Healthy Women and Biohaven Pharmaceuticals for empowering us to have this conversation. It's about each one of us learning and understanding one another for the grace that we need to offer for the journey, and also for us to have the resources we need to make effective decisions when the time comes. And so, great girlfriends, if you are experiencing migraines, if any of what Shoshana has said has resonated with you, I'm going to encourage you to visit your physician, ask the right questions, advocate for yourself. If you don't feel you're getting the care you need, seek another physician, correct?
Right. Yes.
And absolutely. You even mentioned, what is the doctor, the headache specialist?
Yes, a certified headache specialist, which is not the same as someone who just calls himself a headache specialist.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for that certified headache specialist.
And to seek out a certified headache specialist, if there's not one in your area, to find one in the nearest town or the nearest state and make that journey, because it's not a short-term solution. We're looking at a long-term, life solutions that can help really, really groom you for the days ahead. And then also lean into Shoshana's community, because Shoshana, I love that you have rallied over 10,000 active members in social media to join forces. How can everyone connect with you?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a website. It's migrainemeanderings.com. And then on Facebook, you can look us up. I have two groups. One is called Migraine Meanderings, and the other is called Hope for Migraine. They're both groups on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram at Migraine Meanderings, and I'm on Twitter, Migraine Meander. And I think, besides that, I really would encourage people, first of all, to connect with community. It really makes a difference. And secondly, just to hold on to hope. It's really important that we hold on to hope. And if you're losing hope, then there are people in this community who will be there for you and help you stand up and help give you that hope back.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Shoshana. Thank you, great girlfriends, for listening in this week. And I really, really hope that you've gained something powerful as I have from this conversation. So I want to thank you so much for being here, Shoshana.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that.
Great girlfriends, did you enjoy this week's episode of the podcast? If so, would you please give us your amazing review on iTunes? Every single review helps another great girlfriend get plugged into the podcast, into the community. Speaking of community, make sure you join our Facebook group, The Great Girlfriends. You follow us on Instagram at The Great Girlfriends and on Twitter at @the_great_GFS. Last but not least, we'd like to thank my amazing husband, Kwaku, Sam and Dilly, and all of you for being a part of the global community that makes us so strong. Please remember to share with your friends. Keep listening and keep being a great girlfriend. I'm Sybil Amuti, and I'm out. Peace.